So today we're thrilled to welcome Dr. William Li, a physician, researcher, and best-selling author who's changing the way we think about food and health. Now, he's known for his groundbreaking work in how diet influences longevity. Dr. Li has dedicated his career really to understanding how we can use everyday foods to support health, and his research dives deeply into the science behind disease prevention, optimal aging, and how certain foods can help our bodies repair and regenerate. So join us today as we explore Dr. Li's insights on nutrition, his top dietary recommendations, and some practical tips on how to achieve a healthier, longer life. Dr. Li, welcome.
Thanks very much, Phil. Pleasure to be on.
Oh, great. And I mean, obviously, we're leaning into the festive season at the moment, where, of course, a lot of people are going to be thinking about their food. But I guess sort of winding back, what would you say, Dr. Li, are really the essential foods that you would recommend for promoting longevity and maintaining our health?
It's a great question. And, as I think classic in the longevity space or the quest for immortality, we always want to have that gift wrapped answer in the spirit of your introduction.
Yeah.
But in point of fact, as a scientist and also as a clinician, a physician, I can tell you that what we're learning about longevity is very parallel to what we're learning about health, optimizing health at younger ages, which is that it's highly individualized and highly personalized. Now, let me sort of frame that for you in a way that where I can actually tell you some examples of food. So, for example, we all are emerge from our mother's womb. In other words, we're born really with the same physiological operating system as the next child that's actually born. In fact, I like to jokingly say that humans, when we're born, are very similar to Hershey's Kisses candies being pumped out of the factory. Stamp, 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 that silver foil wrap. And really, that's a wonderful opportunity because it means that from the get-go, from the very beginning of life, we are all running on this same or very, very similar operating system. Now, about 5% of our health trajectory, which involves longevity, is associated with genetics. So those genetics may be favorable, or what we know more about are the unfavorable genetics. The cancer genes, the risks for dementia, so on and so forth. Things that actually can rob us of longevity, but it's actually a minority of the factors that actually affect us. And I wanted to start at the beginning of life because if you think about the long journey that we have towards longevity, most people consider longevity, maybe you're 40 or 50 or 60, and now you're really beginning to think heavily about your own longevity or maybe your own mortality.
Yep.
But in fact, this is the conversation that really should start much earlier in life. Parents should be teaching their kids about this, not just about avoiding diabetes and obesity, but really thinking about the long tail of all of our lives. So in that vein, let me just say that the journey that we take as we're growing up in our childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, all of the environmental factors and diet and exercise and sleep and exposures to the environment, all those forces impact on this journey towards longevity that we actually have.
Yeah.
And that's why we all individually begin taking a very different course. We're all cookie cut the same way, but then Phil, your life journey and my life journey have taken us to different places in the solar system of longevity. All right.
Yes,
and
honestly.
so what are some of the foods that are good for me and you? Hard to answer in a cookie cutter way because we are so far along our journey. However, I will tell you that the research that I've done, which is to use the tools of drug discovery to look at foods, give us some really concrete answers on what we can actually do. So, first of all, let me distinguish two things that I look at. Number one is that the best way to get to longevity is to prevent the things that will take you out early. All right. Those things are like heart attack, stroke, cancer. No matter how long you are destined to live, if those things tag you, all right, laser tag you, using the game, laser tag, you want to avoid somebody else's shot at you. you want to be able to avoid those. And the great news is that there are foods that actually can do that. So what are some of the foods that clearly have been shown to lower the risk of cancer and heart disease, all right, and metabolic syndrome like diabetes? Any one of these diseases that wrecks the endothelial lining, the lining of blood vessels within the 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels in your body, will start to degrade your chances of actually making it as long as you otherwise could have. So, what are some of the foods that are good for that? Well, the great news is that the foods that I think are most compelling are easy to get a hold of. For example, studies of green tea, which contain polyphenols, catechins, theaflavins, they actually repair and maintain the health of the lining of the blood vessels. So you want to have good cognition, you need to have good blood flow to your brain. You want to have good blood flow to your brain, you need healthy blood vessels to be able to transmit the oxygen that you breathe and the nutrients that you actually eat to your brain cells. So green tea is one of those really important beverages. I call it, by the way, there's a Holy Trinity of beverages that are really important for health and longevity.
Okay,
The Holy Trinity being tea. We talked about this already.
Yep.
Coffee. So coffee also contains a lot of polyphenols. One of them that has been pretty well studied is called chlorogenic acid. And chlorogenic acid actually has powerful effects on lowering inflammation in your body, including brain inflammation, and also improving the health of your vascular system. So again, my area of special research is on how to optimize your circulation. Again, 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels in your body. These are the highways and byways for the health of all of your tissues. When your blood vessels are healthy, now you can build upon that to make your organs healthy. But if you've got sick blood vessels, there's nothing you can do to optimize your health until you address that. So tea, coffee, and then the third of the Holy Trinity is actually water, because a lot of us don't think about it, but our body is vitally dependent on hydration. And if you want to think about something as important for longevity as cognitive health or visual health or sensory health, being able to smell and taste and touch normally, we need to actually have well hydrated tissues, including from the brain to the eye to the skin. And I think that, a lot of us just we spend a lot of time focusing on, fascinating molecular mechanisms to activate mechanisms to improve longevity and to counter aging. But one of the simplest is actually in our tap, and that is actually water. Oh, by the way, one additional thing about water I think it's really important to think about for longevity is to really filter your water. All right. Look, most of us in the developed world, modern societies, we're fortunate that we are not dealing with, drinking from cesspools that are going to give us typhoid fever. There are unfortunately places around the world that are still struggling just to get clean water. But I think that, most of the people in your audience are probably like you or myself. I mean, we have plenty of access to water. But now, if you want to actually dive deeper to get more out of your drinking water, the water itself is going to hydrate us, but we don't need the extras that can actually be found in our water. Filtration is important because, unbeknownst to us previously, we now know that pharmaceuticals can make their way into the water supply. The woman who, or the man who flushes their extra medications down the toilet, whether it's birth control, whether it's an antidepressant medication, or whether it's their extra Viagra that's actually expired, those can actually slowly seep their way into our drinking water. And in fact, at least in the United States, we've actually detected pharmaceuticals in our drinking water. So filtering that out is actually a good thing, because who needs extra pharmaceuticals in our system? Secondly, we're beginning to realize that, microplastics is another harm that is just beginning to, we've known about microplastics, but now we're beginning to realize microplastics trigger inflammation in our body. And again, Water for hydration, critical for life. Think about the person whose car failed on the side of the desert road and you're crawling out. You need water, but you don't need water with microplastics floating around because those microplastics now accumulate in the brain. Now, if you want cognition in the long run, you definitely don't want to have plastic studying your neurons in your
Yeah,
brain.
of
And you
course.
also don't want plastic particles studying the lining of your blood vessels. And a study from Italy just last year showed in a very striking way that those people who have microplastics embedded in the narrowing, the plaques of their arteries, actually have a fourfold increase in the risk of death from heart attack or stroke. Talk about
Interesting.
cutting short your own potential for longevity. I think filtering water is actually a really good thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe let's just talk a little bit about how food can start to help us with our defense systems, right? Because obviously, what you've identified is that we're under attack all the time, right? Whether it's from the sun or the water we're drinking or our
Yeah.
stress levels or whatever it may be. But what would you say are the 5 key defense systems that are contributing to our overall health and longevity? That obviously has a correlation with the work that you do.
Yeah, no, this is the beating heart of my work. As a medical doctor, we are trained to diagnose and treat diseases. And when I went to medical school, the question I had for my professors that they could not answer was, okay, I know what cancer is and hepatitis, and I know what dementia is, but what is health? What is good health? And I couldn't get an answer for them. So that's why I set on my own journey, my own career, to really try to focus on what is the basis for our health. And it turns out our health is not just the absence of disease, but in fact, our health is, in fact, the result of our own body's hardwired health defenses, as you alluded to. And we've got 5 of them, probably more, but we've got 5 that I've actually spent the most time on. The first is called angiogenesis, which is our circulation. Just mentioned about the importance of having really good blood flow. So that's a good defense system. Second are stem cells. Remarkably, we have our own stem cells that regenerate and repair and renew our bodies from the inside out. Very important as we age because we wind up having fewer stem cells as we get older. And not only do we have fewer stem cells, the stem cells we do have are, let's say, a little sleepier, a little bit less active. And so we could definitely stand from activating and growing more stem cells as we age. The third health defense system is our gut microbiome. I'm very excited about the impact of the gut microbiome on aging because recent studies have been able to use the modern technology of gut microbiome analysis. So, a decade ago, this would have cost $1 million to do and very inaccurately. But in today's world, we're actually able to be fairly accurate using very sophisticated and not terribly expensive tools to be able to mine the literally the poop of older people to find out what it is that helps people get to extreme age. All right. Super agers,
Yeah.
ultra centenarians, people who live to 110, 115. What is it? Are there any clues in their gut microbiome? And we're actually finding that there are at least 4 bacteria that actually are standouts in
Oh,
people who live
interesting.
to not just 100, but to like 105, 110. By the way, Phil, do you know how many people are alive today who are 100 or older? A
I
number.
don't know the statistics, but of course, it's pretty impressive now, but it's going to be incredibly impressive in the future, right?
Right, exactly. So do you know anybody personally who's made it to 100?
My wife's grandmother just made it. So yeah, she's
Okay.
passed away now, but she did it. And
Okay.
she was
So
bright, right? She was very cognitively very active, but she suffered from sarcopenia, which was a shame. So it's frustrating for people that they lose something at that point in their lives.
right. Okay. So you know somebody who made it to 100. My great uncle made it to 104. Again, cognitively intact, able to be quite independent, frankly. And so the fact of the matter is that this quest, this idea of living to 100, which, when I was a kid, living to 100 was just sort of like a pipe dream. But in fact, more and more people are living to 100 today. So I'm going to give you the statistic. As of today, all right, there are 722,000 people who are 100 years old or older. It's almost 750,000 people. So the message that I want to send out to people who are watching or listening to this is that this isn't a pipe dream. This isn't an impossibility. This is a distinct possibility, because many people are making it to 100 today in our world today, despite the onslaught, the attacks that we talked about earlier, and they are not doing it by biohacking. They are not doing it with a continuous glucose monitor. They're not doing it by subscribing to monthly supplements. They're not doing it with infrared light. These are people who are 100 today that are just making it there. So I think the great news is that by peeling back the layer of the onions, okay, layer by layer, we're beginning to discover more, such as even the microbiome, how we could actually get more of us to achieve this milestone, the centennial of our lives. And then how do we optimize it so that when you get there, you are not just alive, but you are thriving, not, and then how do you actually extend from there? So the third health defense system, I think some of the secrets lie in the gut. The fourth is understanding our DNA. Our body has a DNA self-defense system. Most of us recognize that DNA is our genetic code. It is very important. But Mother Nature has proven herself to be incredibly resourceful. So very rarely is a single process in our body just have one job. So part of the job description of our DNA is not just to slam out like a factory the proteins that run our lives, but also to protect our health. How do they do that? You send in some ultraviolet radiation or gamma radiation from outer space. Our body's DNA health defense system neutralizes the incoming, okay? Kind of like the Iron Dome in Israel, like neutralize that. And then it actually send in the construction crew to build back any damage that's there. And then, of course, there's the telomeres, which are well known in the longevity community as the protective caps on the end of our chromosomes, which are the coiled up DNA. And these caps are like the tips of your shoelaces, the plastic tips of your shoelace. They exist to protect the ends of the DNA. And just like the cap on your shoelace, as long as that's there, you can thread your entire shoelace really easily. But once they wear away, in other words, once your telomeres actually are degraded, which happens as we age, suddenly the unraveling of your shoelace kind of becomes the unraveling of your DNA. And now you become much more vulnerable to DNA damage, which then is a setup for mutations and all kinds of health troubles after that. And then finally, after angiogenesis, stem cells, gut microbiome, DNA is one of the most impressive health defenses that we have, which is our immune system. Now, everyone knows by now, how important a good, strong immune system is to protect us from bacteria and viruses from the outside of the world. But I think one of the most fascinating discoveries of our immune system is how good immunity can protect us from invaders inside our body. What am I talking about? I'm talking about cancer cells that are forming all the time in our bodies that our immune system conducts patrols to literally wipe out. So unbeknownst to us, while we're sleeping, while we're busy scrolling, while we're talking on the phone, whether we're having dinner, whether it's a restaurant or your own home, our bodies are forming microscopic cancers, and our immune defenses are actually tackling them invisibly. All right. And so these 5 health defense systems really form the basis of why we don't get sick more often, but they also form the basis of how we can how we can stretch our years as long as we possibly can. Because once you have these health defenses failing, weakening or failing, okay, it is the opening. It's a beginning of really the potential for catastrophe to start occurring in our bodies. So what I always tell people, if you want to live long and prosper, shields up, and foods can actually raise our shields. Many foods, plant-based foods, healthy oils, nuts, seeds, and legumes, the beverages, the Holy Trinity we talk about, those alone, but also together, because we eat foods in combination. People talk about kale. Nobody eats a kale leaf by themselves. Maybe occasionally, but most people are finding wonderful ways to connect. And because I really love the culture of food, and I
Hmm.
deeply respect that food is our and eating is really part of our humanity and ties us to our culture. Wherever we're coming from, there's food that's part of our legacy from our cultural perspective. What is also really exciting for me is the discovery, or perhaps a rediscovery, that many of the foods that our grandparents and great grandparents treasured as part of the traditions from their heritage, from whatever culture you come from, are the same foods that science is now discovering can help us live longer, better lives.
Yeah, yeah. And just to wind back a little bit, Dr. Lee, to this concept of obviously boosting the iron dome, the immune system. Are there any natural methods that we can do that? I mean, are there any foods that you'd recommend? Sort of small but mighty foods that can kind of have that material effect to boosting our immune system.
Yeah, so this is really where the exciting stuff has been discovered. So, blueberries, okay,
Yeah.
which are widely available, have been discovered to have a natural dye that makes blueberries blue, actually, kind of more of a darker purplish color. And the natural chemical, Mother Nature's kind of chemical that she's imbued with into blueberries is called anthocyanins. It's not one molecule; it's a class of molecules, but at the end of the day, they dye. They give the blue color. And if you actually take a blueberry, smash it onto a white tablecloth, you've actually started to create an artistic palette of blue color. And so, this natural dye, though, these anthocyanins have been shown to actually elevate our natural immunity, which is pretty remarkable. And where does it actually activate the immunity? Actually, they've studied this in healthy people who are exercising, training, running,
Yeah.
including
Hmm.
marathon runners, by the way. Many people don't know this, but when you're exercising, you're doing so many good things for your body. But immediately after very vigorous exercise, when you stop, you come out of the gym, you slow down after a run around the block. Okay. You've got your good cardio workout. You've done your high intensity strength training. Guess what? Your immune system, as a response to stopping your exercise, will suddenly take a plummet for a short period of time, but you can actually plummet by as much as a third
Right.
for about a day or so, or a few hours to a day. All right, before your immune system recovers. So, wouldn't it be better to optimize your immunity to just keep it so it doesn't drop? Well, blueberries will do that. Blueberries will elevate your immunity, your baseline immunity, and then in people who are exercising, it prevents that drop of the immune system after exercise. It's kind of like if your alarm system has to cycle and it goes off for a little while, hey, that's a time where like somebody could come into your house without setting off the alarm. So now this is actually just keeping the alarm and keeping your shields up for a longer period of time. Another
Yeah.
food that actually can do this are broccoli sprouts. Sprouts. These are the 3 to 4 day old baby broccoli. Okay, really, the sprouts are the long stems of it. We're not talking about the big green broccoli, the florets, the treetops that you get at the grocery store. We're talking about broccoli. By the way, is mostly stem and a little bit of treetop. If you go to the farmer's market to go look for your broccoli, both treetop and stem, florets and stem, are loaded with sulforaphanes. These are powerful natural substances that boost your immune system in the adult broccoli. Okay. But the broccoli sprouts, the baby broccoli, has 100 times that amount of those immune boosting sulforaphanes inside the little tiny sprouts. Now, these
Wow.
sprouts you can sprinkle on top of a salad. All right. Okay, very easy. Or decorate a dish with it. Or you can actually make a smoothie with it. So, studies have been done in humans, young, healthy people, okay, who are getting a flu vaccine. And it's been shown that if you actually give somebody who's getting a flu vaccine, in addition to the flu vaccine, this is a nasal vaccine, and give them a broccoli sprout shake, all right, you can amplify their immune cell response to protect them against viruses by 22 times. That's it. Just adding the broccoli sprouts will do that. So these are some examples, but the most dramatic example I can tell you about boosting immune defenses, right? And by the way, Let me share with you an insight as a physician. All right. Most people who get to be very, very senior, 80s, 90s, let's say, what usually leads to their death, and if you want to look in a longevity conversation, we're talking about their premature death, all right, at 80 or 90, is really the fact that they get infected and they die. They used to call pneumonia the old man's best friend because you're weak and weakened in almost every other way. Life isn't worth living. And then pneumonia comes and just steals your life very, very quickly. All right. Now, how do we actually prevent pneumonia? Better immunity, right? And so this is why your question about foods that amplify immunity is so important. There's another protection though, and we mentioned this already briefly, which is that our immune system protects us against cancer. All right. Now, cancer definitely robs people of their ability to actually extend their life, especially in people between, let's say, the ages of 40 and 70, or maybe 40 and 80. So that 4-decade period, if you can avoid cancer in that period, you're probably going to make it all the way without getting cancer. But many people, 1 in 2 men, 1 in 3 women, will be diagnosed with some form of cancer within that window. We call it kind of like the death tunnel. If you can actually make it through that tunnel, that gauntlet, without being, hit by cancer, that's really kind of our goal. So how do you actually dodge and weave your way through that? Strong immunity will do it. So now we know that to have a strong immunity to wipe out microscopic cancer cells, you also want to have a healthy gut, because our healthy gut microbiome, which you can make healthier by eating prebiotics, which are polyphenols from our colorful foods, and dietary fiber, which you can find from most fruits and vegetables. The average size pear, by the way, has about 6 grams of dietary fiber, medium sized pear. That has been shown by cancer researchers in people with melanoma, a deadly form of skin cancer, treated with immunotherapy. This is a cancer treatment that requires you to have a good immune system, that if you want to respond to immunotherapy, your gut bacteria have to be really happy and healthy, and that for every 5 to 6 grams of dietary fiber you add per day, so we're just talking about eating a medium-sized pear per day, you decrease mortality by 30%.
Wow,
Okay,
that's
so
amazing.
these are I'm giving you human correlates to
Hmm.
foods that amplify immunity, and this is the work that I do. One of the things that I started realizing, my background is in biotechnology, so I've spent my whole career looking at how to study the effects of the latest scientific ways of manipulating health against disease in the biotech setting. And about 20 years ago, I realized, disease treatments are important, very important. Okay, we need to have that tool in the toolbox, but we were missing the biggest opportunity of all, which is to prevent disease in the first place.
Yes.
And to do prevention, drugs are really not the best answer. They're expensive. They all have side effects, just as a part of their nature. And unfortunately, the people who often need the drugs the most can't get access to them for a whole plethora of reasons. And so for me, I began to focus my attention on foods, to look at foods as a tool in the toolbox, and then to apply the rigorous methodology of hardcore science. The same science we use for drug development, we can study food with. And all of a sudden, we're beginning to enter into this conversation of longevity, health and longevity, and not just adding years, but adding quality to those years as well.
Yeah, and maybe let's just sort of lean into what that means if you perhaps have some conditions that maybe you want to try and rewind the clock. Regenerative health obviously is a big part of the longevity agenda. I mean, are there any specific foods or practices that you could suggest that would support that natural healing? Because obviously we're replacing so many cells in our body on a continual basis, but we need some help when we get older, right, with that?
Yeah. So I mentioned our stem cells being one of our most important health of the 5 health defense systems, one of the most important for longevity, because in point of fact, we are regenerating inside our bodies silently all the time.
Yeah.
Now, where do these stem cells come from? Like I'm not talking about driving to the strip mall at the end of your neighborhood to get an injection of somebody else's stem cells into your elbow or your knee. Now, in the United States, this is actually pretty common. And I know there are places in Eastern Europe and people like places in Mexico and in Asia where stem cell therapy is sort of being routinely delivered to people who have the means, the financial means to travel, medical tourism to get stem cell therapy. Look, I spent 20 years working with the life science, biotech, pharmaceutical industry, working on stem cells. I will tell you, as a player in this space, stem cells can work and work in remarkable ways. I've seen that in the clinical work that I've done. However, showing how to do it in a reliable, repeatable way, safely and cost effectively, is still, we're not ready for prime time yet. So what we're talking about right now are the stem cells that Mother Nature gave us. Okay. Where do our stem cells come from? Well, before we were born, and I like to go back to beginning because, so much of the conversation about longevity is sort of, how do we actually get in our 40s and stay looking like we're in 40s to 100 or whatever number you want to choose. But I think that we get a lot of mileage out of understanding how our origin stories were. So when your dad's sperm met your mom's egg and you were just a ball of cells, what led to the formation of your face, your ears, your liver, your lungs, your tongue, your big toe, okay, were stem cells. Stem cells formed us and to be who we are. Fast forward to 9 months, you're crawling out of your mom's womb, all right, out of the birth canal. The doctor cuts the umbilical cord, all right, and you take your first breath. You still have extra stem cells that are still around because the way that Mother Nature engineered our body, humans develop so we don't run out of stem cells before we're born. Imagine how much it would suck if we actually got to 8 months and 29 days or 30 days and oops, we're just short of like 10,000 stem cells. So we didn't finish forming our lips or didn't finish forming our eyes. So Mother Nature gave us 70 million extra stem cells. So when we're born, we have a lot of excess. That excess, the moment that cord is cut, those stem cells make a beeline to their resting spots in our bodies where they're going to live for the rest of our lives. Our bone marrow, our body fat, our skin, our livers, even some in our lungs. And that's where they stay. They live there like bees in a hive. And just like bees in a hive, they stay in the hive, okay, until they need to go out to do something, right? So when a bee leaves the hive, they're looking for pollen to bring back and to make honey out of. When our stem cells leave the hive, leave our bone marrow is where most of the stem cells are. They come flying out of our bone marrow like bees coming out of a hive into our bloodstream, and they are looking for areas, any organ, any tissue that needs to be repaired. Oh, in Phil's liver, there's a little piece that needs to be repaired. No problem. Let's go. Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's fix it up. All right. You won't feel it. You won't know about it. There's no medical test currently being used in the clinic widely that shows that repair. But the great news is that you've been fixed invisibly from the inside out. Okay. Now, that's the good news that we can do this. The bad news is that by the time we get to our older age, like 60 and above, all right, sort of mid-adulthood to the end of adulthood, however you want to define that, all right, we're losing the number and the activity of our stem cells. We estimate about 50% of our stem cells are down, either by number or by activity, all right? So what's really exciting is the discovery that foods can boost up our own body's stem cells, even when we're in our 60s. So what are those foods? Well, I'll tell you, there's some pretty cool foods that we should know about. One of them, by the way, is tea. Studies in Italy have shown that black tea, English breakfast tea, Earl Grey tea, can actually wake up our stem cells, but you don't want to put milk in it, okay? Sorry, people in England, even though I enjoy milk with tea, in that traditional sense, it turns out that dairy fat, okay, from cow's milk, not nut milk, dairy fat, will form tiny little soap bubbles in our tea. All right, they're little invisible soap bubbles, but those soap bubbles trap the polyphenols in our tea.
Okay.
So when we sip our tea, as delicious as it may taste, the soap bubbles roll down our gut, and we miss the opportunity to absorb about 80% of the polyphenols. But those polyphenols, when you have straight on black tea, okay, which, this is how tea is often consumed in Asia,
Yeah.
India, China, Japan. When you have black tea straight on, okay, it raises the number of stem cells in your bloodstream and it powers up your stem cells. All right, it gives your stem cells a boost and calls them out so that they're actually looking for trouble and they're fixing it. It's like sending out the road crew on a highway before you wind up having the big sinkhole open up because the highway hasn't been maintained. You might as well get those road crews out there driving, to look for any of the problems and just fixing the problems when they're small. Okay, what's another food that can actually increase our stem cells and fix problems? People are going to like to hear this one. Dark chocolate. Amazingly, dark chocolate. Okay, let me clarify. Chocolate is a confection, which is a candy made in a factory with a lot of things added to it to taste great. But dark chocolate is a plant-based food because cacao, the darker the chocolate, the greater percent cacao. 80% cacao or higher is kind of what I suggest people go after. 70 to 80 or higher. All right, that the cacao is plant-based. And because it's plant-based, it's going to have polyphenols. And the polyphenols we know in cacao are called proanthocyanidins. I always tell people, don't worry about memorizing all the names and stuff like that. Just trust that there are scientists that are figuring this stuff out. And these proanthocyanidins, when you eat them in the form of dark chocolate, 70 to 80% or higher, which you could turn into a hot chocolate, which you can have into a bar. And if 80% is better, is 100% better? Probably. Okay. 100% is kind of bitter. So what's the best way to have a bitter 100% piece of dark chocolate? I would say have it with a cup of espresso or coffee, no cream in it. Okay. You can put nut milk, but don't put anything else. Now you've got chocolate and coffee. You got mocha. You see what I'm saying? Like this is all very, very doable and attainable. You don't have to go to great lengths to do it. But studies have shown in people in their 60s, men in their 60s who have known coronary artery disease, vascular disease. All right, this is an area I studied. That if you gave them, one study gave these men with documented bad blood vessels and heart disease 2 cups of hot chocolate made with dark chocolate to drink every single day for 30 days, for a month. And what was found at the end is that drinking that hot chocolate was able to double the number of stem cells in their bloodstream, just with a simple blood test. And the real question is, did it work? Did it help their circulation? The answer is yes, it did, because they did a test called flow-mediated dilation, where you put a blood pressure cuff on the arm and an ultrasound in the crook of your elbow, and you actually blow up the blood pressure cuff, so you're basically cutting off all the blood flow, all right? And then, the pulse wave of your ultrasound goes flat, and then suddenly you let it go. You let the blood pressure cuff go. Now blood comes resurging back into your arm, and the ultrasound is able to measure the wave and see how resilient your blood vessels are to tackle that rebound. And young, healthy blood vessels rebound quickly. All right. And what they found is that compared to people before they had dark chocolate, after dark chocolate, with more stem cells, double the number of stem cells in the bloodstream, by the way, they also doubled their resiliency of their blood vessels as well. So again, I like to sort of talk in my work, and I do this on my YouTube channel all the time. What is the human evidence that supports the use of food as medicine for health at younger ages? But also now increasingly, the conversation is what is the evidence to support food as medicine as we aspire to get older and healthier?
Well, I mean, Dr. Lee, I'm already rethinking my regimen when I get up in the morning and what I might be putting in my smoothie now, because it's fascinating when you distill it down to such a simple level. It's not that hard, right, for human beings to adapt to these things. And of course, we could go on all day. I mean, I'm fascinated by the conversation, but how about we do a couple of quick fire questions? Are you up for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Bring it on.
All right. Okay. So what's the one food you believe everyone should eat more often?
I think everyone should drink tea, green tea.
And are there any surprising foods out there that support cellular health and longevity?
Yes, pomegranate seeds, pomegranate juice. They actually contain a bioactive called tannins that improve our gut microbiome, grow a specific bacteria called Akkermansia that has been found to be a standout in people who are super agers, those who live to 105 and older.
Wow. So how about this one? How often would you recommend people update their or change their diets based on your new research?
Uh, two simple things. Number one, don't overeat, because even though we talk about caloric restriction and fasting, let's start with the simple things. Don't overload your plate. Don't overwhelm your metabolism. Never go back for seconds. And for firsts, only take 2/3 of what you would normally take. That's the first thing that I would actually recommend. And second, I would say don't eat after dinner. Okay. Don't eat before bedtime. No midnight snacking. Just doing those two easy maneuvers already starts to pivot. I mean, these are things that a lot of people do frequently without knowing it or without thinking about it. But those two simple maneuvers will already start to change the compass point of where your biological compass is going to head you from a longevity perspective.
Okay. So what's one common misconception about the metabolism of aging?
I think a common misconception is that one single maneuver will watch you do it, whether it's fasting or exercise or taking any single supplement. You can name your supplement: resveratrol, NAD, NMN, whatever it is, curcumin. No single thing will actually do it. It's really the fact that our bodies are such complex machines. It's actually quite hard to kill the body. All right. And because we are able to fight so hard on behalf of ourselves biologically, so too it's easy to actually keep the engine moving and counter the kind of the distractions to our health that aging process kind of imposes in our body. But you don't want to be doing just one thing. I mean, this fire forget, that people always ask me, Dr. Lee, tell me the one food you need to eat for longevity. And again, back to our very beginning of this conversation, there's a lot of foods you can actually eat. It's very highly personalized, and eating food itself won't do it. There's a number of things that are all going to add up to your years.
Okay. So if you were to give somebody a bit of advice and say to support your health and your longevity, do this one thing, what would that be?
Well, I would say be physically active, because no matter what else you do, what supplements you take, what food you eat, what fasting practices you do, the bottom line, how much ultra processed food you cut out of your life, the bottom line is that our body is designed to live to move. So when you stop moving, you're really taking away a huge lever for our ability to live long. And so too often you see you have this mental picture of an elderly person sitting in a chair or lying in a bed, immobile. And again, that is a self-fulfilling prophecy of shortening your life.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Lee, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I know that I've learned something today. I've been reminded of some of the things that I really should be relearning as a maturing human. And of course, our readers and listeners are going to be very fascinated by this too. So how can people find out more about your work? I presume you have a website. You mentioned a blog earlier.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have a YouTube channel. You can find me at Dr. William Lee, Li, and that's the same as my website, drwilliamlee.com. And I'm also on social. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, the usual suspects. But sign up to my newsletter, my YouTube channel. I'm putting a lot of energy in because people are asking me questions about longevity and health all the time. And while I used to answer them one by one, I realized I could compile them together and just put them out 3 times a week on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, great. Well, Dr. Lee, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much, Phil. Thanks for having me on.